History does not arrive loudly. It is filed, approved, edited, printed, and repeated. This is not a story of secrets or conspiracies. This is the quiet story of how governments slowly organize the past. We often imagine history as a grand parade of heroes and villains, of epic battles and world-changing speeches. But the reality is often much quieter, much more bureaucratic. This is the story of how the past is managed, curated, and presented to the public. Think about the American Revolution. We remember the soaring words of the Declaration of Independence, the dramatic crossing of the Delaware. But what about the paperwork? The countless letters, requisitions for supplies, committee meeting minutes, and financial ledgers that made the revolution possible. These documents, mundane as they seem, are the gears that turned the great machine of change. They tell a different kind of story, one of logistics, compromise, and the immense, tedious effort of building a new nation from scratch. This is where the process of selection begins. A historian, an archivist, a curator, they all make choices. Out of millions of documents, which ones are preserved, which are digitized, which are featured in an exhibit? These aren't sinister decisions, but they are powerful. The choice to highlight a general's heroic letter over a quartermaster's desperate plea for shoes shapes our understanding. It prioritizes the glorious charge over the logistical nightmare. History isn't just what happened, it's what we choose to remember, and government is the biggest chooser of all. National archives, presidential libraries, and federally funded museums are the official repositories of our past. They have a mandate, not just to preserve, but to present a version of history that fosters national identity and civic pride. This isn't necessarily a bad thing. A shared story binds a nation together, but it means the narrative is inherently tilted. It emphasizes unity over division, success over failure, and consensus over dissent. Let's take the Civil War. The official narrative, for a long time, focused on the bravery of soldiers on both sides and the great tragedy of a brother's war. This story, known as the Lost Cause in the South and a story of reunification in the North, served a political purpose to heal the wounds of a divided country. But in doing so, it often downplayed the central cause of the war, slavery, and glossed over the brutal realities of Reconstruction and the century of racial oppression that followed. The documents telling that harder story were always there. The letters from freed slaves, the records of violent paramilitary groups, the legislative debates that rolled back civil rights. But they weren't the story the nation was ready to hear, so they were filed away, left in the archives, waiting for a new generation of historians to pull them out and challenge the comfortable, sanitized version of the past. This is a crucial point. The archive holds many stories. The one that gets told depends on who is asking the questions and what the society they live in is willing to confront. The process gets even more refined when it comes to education. The creation of a history textbook is a battleground of ideas. State and local school boards, publishers, and special interest groups all weigh in on what should be included. Should the textbook describe the westward expansion as manifest destiny or as a violent conquest? Should it call industrialists captains of industry or robber barons? Each word is chosen carefully, each chapter approved through layers of committees. The result is a product of compromise, a textbook designed to be acceptable to the widest possible audience often becomes bland and stripped of controversy. The story of government organizing the past isn't just about preserving it. It's about packaging it for mass consumption. Think of the Cold War. For decades, American students learned a clear narrative, a struggle of freedom versus tyranny, democracy versus communism. The United States was the unequivocal hero, but this official story, promoted through government agencies and reflected in textbooks, left a lot out. It didn't dwell on the democratically elected governments the CIA helped overthrow or the brutal dictators the US supported simply because they were anti-communist. Again, the evidence was there in declassified documents and government reports. But it didn't fit the simple, heroic narrative required for a nation locked in a global ideological struggle. The files were approved, the story was edited, and the lesson was repeated. We were the good guys. This brings us to the digital age. You might think the internet, with its limitless access to information, would shatter these curated narratives. And in some ways, it has. Primary source documents are more accessible than ever before. Alternative histories flourish. Anyone can be a historian, publishing their findings on a blog or a YouTube channel. But the quiet organization of the past continues, just in a new form. Government websites are now the primary source of official information. Digital archives are curated with algorithms. The sheer volume of information online creates a new challenge. In this chaos, the official, easily digestible narratives provided by established institutions often become the most trusted and visible. The government's voice may not be the only one, but it is often the loudest and most authoritative in the digital square. Furthermore, the digital world has its own filing cabinets. Think about social media feeds. The algorithms that control what you see are making millions of editorial choices every second. They learn what you like, what you engage with, and they show you more of it. This can create powerful echo chambers, where a particular version of history, whether it's an official government narrative or a fringe conspiracy theory, is reinforced over and over again. So what is the takeaway from all of this? It's not that we should be cynical or believe in vast conspiracies. The people who file, edit, and print our history are often dedicated public servants doing their best to make sense of a chaotic past. The point is to be aware of the process, to understand that any history you read, especially the official kind, is a product. It has been shaped, selected, and polished. The real story, the complete story, is always messier. It lives in the footnotes, in the dissenting opinions, in the documents that were not chosen for the museum display. It requires us to be active, not passive, consumers of history. It means asking questions. Who is telling this story? What might they have left out? What was their purpose? It means seeking out different perspectives and being willing to sit with uncomfortable truths. History is not a static object we can simply receive. It is an ongoing conversation, a constant process of revaluation. The quiet work of organizing the past in government buildings will never stop, but our job as citizens is to make a little noise, to pull open the drawers they've closed, to read the reports they've filed away, and to ensure that the story of our past is as complete, as complex, and as true as we can possibly make it. Because the way we understand our past profoundly shapes the future we are willing to build. Thank you for watching. History begins as chaos. Governments turn it into chapters. Committees decide wording. Editors remove details. What remains becomes official. This sanitized, organized narrative is what we learn in school. It's the version stamped in textbooks, shelved in libraries, and filed away in archives. It's neat, it's tidy, and it's often incomplete. But what if I told you that the real story, the messy, chaotic, and infinitely more fascinating truth, is hidden in plain sight? It's not in the grand pronouncements of kings or the treaties signed by presidents. It's in the margins, the footnotes, and the stories that were deemed too strange, too small, or too inconvenient to make the final cut. These are the forgotten tales, the historical oddities that reveal more about our past than any official timeline. Take, for instance, the Great Emu War of Australia. Yes, you heard that right. In 1932, the Australian military, armed with machine guns, declared war on a population of emus. After World War I, thousands of veterans were given land to farm, but they soon faced an unexpected enemy: 20,000 emus migrating and devastating their crops. The farmers, many of them ex-soldiers, appealed for help. The Minister of Defense, Sir George Pierce, saw a PR opportunity and dispatched troops. It sounds like a joke, but it was real. The soldiers, however, found the emus to be surprisingly formidable opponents. The birds were fast, hard to hit, and would scatter in all directions, making the machine guns ineffective. After a week of comical failure and a lot of wasted ammunition, the military withdrew in defeat. The media had a field day, with one ornithologist noting that if the military had an EMU division, it would be invincible. The emus had won. This wasn't just a funny anecdote. It was a story about post-war struggle, environmental conflict, and the humbling limits of human power. Now let's journey back to the 16th century, to the Holy Roman Empire, and a phenomenon known as the Dancing Plague of 1518. It started with one woman, Frau Trophia, who stepped into the streets of Strasbourg and began to dance. She didn't stop. Within a week, 34 others had joined her. Within a month, there were 400. They danced relentlessly, without music, day and night. Authorities were baffled. At first, they thought the cure was more dancing, so they built a stage and hired musicians, hoping the dancers would tire themselves out. This only made it worse. People started dying from exhaustion, heart attacks, and strokes. The official chronicles of the time document this bizarre event, but they offer no clear explanation. Was it a form of mass hysteria, a stress-induced psychosis? Was it caused by ergot, a toxic mold that grows on rye and can cause spasms and hallucinations? We still don't know for sure. It's a chilling reminder of how fragile the human mind can be and how society can be gripped by a collective madness that defies rational explanation. This wasn't a battle or a political treaty, but it tells us volumes about the anxieties and pressures of medieval life. Let's shift gears from the bizarre to the brilliant and talk about a forgotten genius of the ancient world, Hero of Alexandria. Living in the 1st century AD, this Greek inventor created things that seemed to belong in a much later era. He designed the first ever steam engine, called an eolopile, a sphere that spun powered by jets of steam. He created automated temple doors that opened with fire, intricate puppet theaters that ran on their own, and even a vending machine that dispensed holy water when you inserted a coin. His work was centuries ahead of its time. So why isn't he as famous as Leonardo da Vinci? Why didn't his steam engine spark an industrial revolution in ancient Rome? The simple answer is context. The Roman Empire was built on slave labor. There was no economic incentive to develop labor-saving machines. Heroes' inventions were seen as novelties, clever toys for the rich, not as transformative technology. His story is a powerful lesson in how progress isn't just about invention. It's about timing, necessity, and the structure of society itself. The greatest idea in the world can wither if the world isn't ready for it. Now, have you ever heard of the year without a summer? In 1816, the world experienced a catastrophic climate anomaly. Skies darkened, temperatures plummeted, and snow fell in June in North America and Europe. Crops failed on a massive scale, leading to the worst famine of the 19th century. Riots and looting broke out as people starved. The cause was a mystery at the time. It was unteamed until a century later that scientists connected it to the monumental 1815 eruption of Mount Tambora in Indonesia, the largest volcanic eruption in recorded history. The sheer volume of ash and sulfur dioxide it spewed into the stratosphere blocked out the sun, creating a volcanic winter. But the ripple effects of this natural disaster were cultural as well as climatic. Stuck indoors during a gloomy, cold summer in Switzerland, a group of friends challenged each other to write ghost stories. One of them, a young Mary Shelley, wrote a story that would become Frankenstein. Another, Lord Byron, wrote a poem called Darkness, inspired by the bleak world outside. That same year, the lack of oats for horses prompted a German inventor named Carl von Drey to create a new form of transportation, a wheeled contraption that was the forerunner to the modern bicycle. A single volcanic eruption on the other side of the world led to famine, riots, the birth of a literary genre, and the invention of the bicycle. History is not a straight line. It's a web of interconnected events where a geological event can reshape human culture in ways no one could ever predict. Let's look at another strange chapter, this time from American history. In the early 20th century, there was a widespread moral panic about a new invention, the telephone. It seems absurd now, but many people were terrified of it. Doctors warned that listening to a telephone could cause deafness. Others claimed it could transmit diseases. There were fears that criminals would use it for their nefarious schemes, or that it would destroy face-to-face communication, making people isolated and lonely. Some religious leaders even declared it an instrument of the devil. A town in Sweden banned telephones, fearing that the wires would attract lightning. This wasn't just a fringe belief, it was a mainstream anxiety. It shows us a recurring pattern in history. Every new, transformative technology is met with fear and suspicion. The same anxieties about social decay, health risks, and moral corruption were later directed at radio, television, video games, and of course, the internet. These forgotten fears aren't just funny historical footnotes. They're a mirror reflecting our own contemporary anxieties about the rapid pace of technological change. Finally, let's consider the story of the lost army of Cambyses too. In 524 BC, the Persian king Cambyses sent an army of 50,000 soldiers across the Egyptian desert to attack the Oracle of Ammon. According to the Greek historian Herodotus, the army marched for 7 days, then vanished without a trace, swallowed by a massive sandstorm. For centuries, this story was treated as a legend, a cautionary tale about the hubris of a king. Archaeologists searched for this lost army for decades, but found nothing. It was dismissed as a fabrication. But recently, modern research has started to paint a different picture. Some historians now theorize that there was no sandstorm. They believe the army was not lost, but ambushed and defeated by an Egyptian rebel leader. The story of the sandstorm they argue, was Persian propaganda, a way for the king to save face and avoid admitting a humiliating military defeat. The myth of a supernatural disaster was more palatable than the reality of being outsmarted by his enemies. This reinterpretation changes everything. It's a story about how history is written by the victors, and how even the accounts of ancient historians can be a form of political spin. The truth isn't always buried under sand. Sometimes it's buried under layers of storytelling. These stories of a war against birds, a plague of dancing, an ancient steam engine, a summer of darkness, a fear of telephones, and a lost army are more than just historical trivia. They are the glitches in the matrix of our official history. They show us that the past was stranger, more complex, and more wonderfully human than the textbooks would have us believe. They teach us that history is not a static collection of facts, but an ongoing investigation, full of mysteries, waiting to be uncovered. So next time you read a history book, remember the chaos that was edited out, the chapters that were never written, and the weird, wonderful details that lie waiting in the margins, because that's where the real story often begins. Thanks for joining me on this journey through the forgotten corners of the past. If you enjoyed these stories, hit that like button and subscribe for more dives into the weird and wonderful side of history. Let me know in the comments which of these stories surprised you the most. See you next time. Have you ever sat in a classroom and felt like you were only getting half the story? You see the timeline on the board, neat and tidy. 1492, Columbus sails the ocean blue. 1776, the Declaration of Independence. 1865, the Civil War ends. It's all there, presented as a series of straightforward facts, a clean line from past to present. But what if that line isn't so straight? What if the real story is much, much messier? Children do not learn complexity. They learn simplified timelines. Governments prefer clean stories. Complicated truths are exhausting. This isn't just a random thought. It's the quiet reality of many educational systems. We are taught a version of history that is palatable, that fits a national narrative. It's a story of heroes and villains, of clear-cut victories and noble causes. But history, real history, is rarely that simple. Take the story of Christopher Columbus. For generations, he was celebrated as the brave explorer who discovered America. The story was simple. A visionary man, 3 small ships, a perilous journey, and a new world. But this clean story omits the brutal reality for the indigenous peoples who were already there. It sanitizes the violence, the disease, and the enslavement that followed in his wake. To acknowledge that complexity is to challenge the very foundation of the story we've been told. It forces us to ask uncomfortable questions about our origins and the price of progress. This process of simplification isn't accidental. It's often by design. Standardized tests and packed curriculums leave little room for deep dives or nuanced discussions. Teachers, even those who want to explore the gray areas, are often bound by district mandates and the pressure to get through a massive amount of material. The system itself is built for efficiency, not for critical inquiry. It rewards memorization of dates and names over an understanding of the intricate web of cause and effect, human motivation, and conflicting perspectives. Think about the American Revolution. We learn about the noble ideals of liberty and freedom, the fight against tyranny. And those things are true. But it's also true that many of the founding fathers who signed a document declaring that all men are created equal were themselves slave owners. How do we reconcile that? The simplified version of history often just doesn't. It glosses over the paradox, presenting a version of these figures that is one-dimensional. They become marble statues, not complex, flawed human beings. The civil rights movement is another powerful example. We learn about Martin Luther King Jr.'s "I Have a Dream" speech, a beautiful and inspiring moment. But the movement was so much more than one speech. It was a long, bloody, and difficult struggle involving thousands of people, many of whom had different ideas about the best path forward. There were fierce debates within the movement itself. There were figures like Malcolm X, whose more radical stance is often downplayed or presented as a simple counterpoint to Dr. King's nonviolence, rather than a valid and complex response to systemic oppression. By focusing only on the most unifying and comfortable moments, we lose the raw, gritty reality of what it takes to fight for change. Why does this happen? Why the preference for these clean stories? Part of it is about creating a sense of national identity and pride. It's easier to rally around a simple, heroic past than a complicated, morally ambiguous one. It's less work. Complicated truths require us to think critically, to hold multiple, sometimes contradictory, ideas in our minds at once. They challenge our assumptions and can make us feel uncomfortable. For a system designed to educate millions, simplicity often seems like the path of least resistance. But what is the cost of this simplification? The cost is a citizenry that is less equipped to understand the complexities of the present. The world we live in is not a series of neat bullet points. The problems we face today, systemic inequality, political polarization, international conflicts, are rooted in that messy, complicated history we so often ignore. If we don't understand the complex roots of these issues, how can we possibly hope to solve them? If we only learn about history's heroes and villains, we struggle to see the humanity, both good and bad, in the leaders and people around us today. When we are taught that history is a settled matter, a collection of facts to be memorized, we lose our curiosity. We stop asking why. We accept the story we're given. But history is not a static object in a museum. It is a living, breathing conversation. It's an ongoing argument, constantly being reevaluated as new evidence comes to light and new voices are heard. The voices of women, of people of color, of immigrants, of the poor voices that were historically marginalized are now enriching and complicating our understanding of the past. The good news is that we don't have to accept the simplified version. The real stories are out there, waiting to be found. They are in the books that aren't on the required reading list. They are in documentaries, in podcasts, in museum exhibits that dare to tell a fuller story. They are in conversations with people whose experiences are different from our own. True education isn't about memorizing the right answers. It's about learning how to ask the right questions. It's about developing the critical thinking skills to look at a story and ask, who is telling this story? Whose perspective is missing? What is the evidence? Who benefits from this version of events? This isn't about erasing history or feeling guilty about the past. It's about seeking the truth in all its messy, uncomfortable, and fascinating glory. It's about understanding that progress is not a straight line and that heroes can be flawed. It's about replacing a simple, fragile narrative with a stronger, more resilient understanding of who we are and how we got here. Because when we learn to embrace the complexity of the past, we are far better prepared to navigate the complexities of the future. The clean stories might be easier, but the complicated truths are what set us free. Thank you so much for watching. If this video made you think, please consider subscribing to the channel for more deep dives into the stories that shape our world. We'll see you in the next one. Have you ever walked through a museum and felt a sense of calm, almost reverence? The quiet halls, the soft lighting, the artifacts resting peacefully behind glass. It feels like a neutral space, a place of pure fact and history, where objects simply tell their stories. But what if I told you that this feeling of neutrality is one of the most powerful illusions a museum creates? Think about it. For every single object you see on display, there are thousands, sometimes millions, more stored away in archives, hidden from public view. Who decides which face, which painting, which fossil gets its moment in the spotlight? For every caption you read, carefully written and placed just so, what stories are being left out? Every choice, from the color of the walls to the flow of the exhibits, is a deliberate decision made by a team of curators, designers, and directors. And these decisions shape not just what you see, but how you feel and what you understand about the past. Museums aren't just collections of old things. They are powerful storytellers, and the story they choose to tell is never the whole story. Let's start with the very act of collecting. How did these objects get here in the first place? Many of the world's most famous museums were founded during the height of colonialism in the 19th century. Explorers, soldiers, and administrators from European empires traveled the globe, and they brought back more than just stories. They brought back artifacts. Sometimes they were purchased, sometimes they were gifts, and often they were simply taken. The British Museum, for example, is filled with treasures like the Rosetta Stone from Egypt and the Parthenon marbles from Greece. Their presence in London is a direct legacy of Britain's imperial past. When we see these objects displayed in a grand European capital, the story they tell is often one of discovery and preservation. The museum becomes the hero, rescuing these priceless artifacts for the benefit of all humanity. But that's just one side of the story. From the perspective of the countries they were taken from, the story is one of loss, of cultural heritage being removed from its original context. The debate over repatriating these items, returning them to their countries of origins, a huge and ongoing conversation. It forces us to ask, who truly owns the past? And does displaying an object in a foreign museum honor its history or erase it? This brings us to the display itself. The way an object is presented dramatically changes its meaning. Imagine a sacred indigenous mask. In its original community, it might have been used in ceremonies, a living part of a vibrant culture, imbued with spiritual power. Now, picture that same mask mounted on a plain white wall in a museum under a spotlight with a small label next to it. The label might say, "Ceremonial Mask, Late 19th Century, North America." Suddenly, it's no longer a living object. It's an artifact. It's been transformed from a piece of culture into a piece of art or ethnography, categorized and analyzed from a Western perspective. The silence of the gallery is a stark contrast to the sounds of the ceremony it was once part of. The museum hasn't just moved the mask, it has fundamentally changed its identity. And let's talk about those little labels. They seem so innocent, so helpful, just a few lines of text to give you some context, but the words on those labels are chosen with incredible care. They carry immense weight. Think about a display on American history. If a label describes the arrival of Europeans in the Americas as the discovery of the New World, it centers the European perspective. It implies the continent was empty and waiting to be found, ignoring the millions of indigenous people who already lived there. Who gets to write these labels? Who approves the final text? Every sentence is a battleground of perspectives. A label describing a Civil War general might call him a hero in a museum in the South, but a traitor in a museum in the North. The language used subtly guides our interpretation. It tells us who to root for, what to value, and whose history matters most. The neutral voice of the museum is often the voice of the dominant culture, the victors of history. Even the architecture of the museum itself is part of the design. Many older museums are built in a neoclassical style, with grand columns, high ceilings, and marble floors. Think of the Louvre or the Metropolitan Museum of Art. These buildings look like temples. They are intentionally designed to inspire a sense of awe and authority. When you walk into a space like that, you are subconsciously told that the knowledge contained within is important, official, and unquestionable. The building itself says, "Listen, don't question. This is the truth." The layout is also a narrative tool. The path you are encouraged to follow through an exhibit is a journey with a beginning, middle, and end. Art history museums often arrange their collections chronologically, creating a neat, linear story of progress from the primitive art of ancient civilizations to the masterpieces of the Renaissance, and finally to the innovation of modern art. This timeline reinforces a very Western-centric idea of artistic development, suggesting that all art history leads inevitably to the European masters. It can marginalize or completely ignore the rich, complex, and non-linear artistic traditions from other parts of the world. So, if museums are not neutral, what can we do? Does this mean we should stop going to them? Absolutely not. We need to become more active and critical visitors. Instead of passively accepting the story being presented, we can start asking questions. When you look at an object, ask yourself, how did it get here? Whose story is this object telling, and whose story is missing? Read the labels critically. What words are being used? What perspective is being promoted? Look around you. Who else is in the museum? Who is represented on the walls? And who is missing from the picture? Are the staff and visitors diverse? This can tell you a lot about who the museum considers its audience. The good news is that many museums are aware of these issues and are actively trying to change. There's a growing movement within the museum world to decolonize collections, to tell more inclusive stories, and to collaborate with the communities whose histories they display. Some museums are rewriting their labels to include multiple perspectives. Others are creating exhibits that directly address their own complicated histories. They are inviting guest curators from different backgrounds to offer new interpretations of their collections. They are using technology to bring in voices and stories that were previously silenced. This is a slow and difficult process, but it's a necessary one. A museum's job isn't just to preserve the past, but to help us understand our present. And to do that, they have to be honest about how those stories of the past have been constructed. The next time you walk into a museum, I challenge you to see it differently. Don't just look at the artifacts. Look at the choices behind them. Read between the lines of the captions. Listen to the silence and ask what it's hiding. A museum isn't a passive window into the past. It's an active argument about who we were, who we are, and who we want to be. And by being a critical visitor, you become part of that conversation. You help shape the future of how we remember. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this interesting, consider liking this video and subscribing for more deep dives into the hidden structures of our world. What's an experience you've had in a museum that made you question the story being told? Let me know in the comments below. See you next time. Ever looked at a map? Of course you have. But have you ever really looked at one? Not just to find your way from A to B, but to see what it's truly telling you. Maps are more than just lines on paper or pixels on a screen. They are stories. They are declarations of power. And most importantly, they teach us loyalty. Think about it. The bold lines defining your country's borders. That's your team. Everything inside is us, and everything outside is them. From the moment we're old enough to understand a map in a classroom, we're taught to see the world in this way. We learn the shape of our nation like we learn the shape of our own face in the mirror. It becomes a part of us, a symbol of belonging. This isn't just geography. It's the very foundation of national identity. The map tells you where you belong, and in doing so, it commands a subtle, powerful loyalty. But what happens when those lines move? History is filled with shifting borders. Wars are won and lost. Treaties are signed, and suddenly the map is redrawn. A town that was once in country A is now in country B. The people haven't moved, but their national identity, according to the map, has been completely transformed overnight. Generations of loyalty are suddenly redirected. A new flag is raised, a new anthem is sung, and the new map on the wall solidifies this new reality. It's a powerful reminder that loyalty isn't always a choice. Sometimes it's drawn for you. Let's bring it closer to home, to the streets you walk every day. Have you ever noticed a street name change? One day it's King George Avenue, the next it's Republic Street. This isn't just an administrative update, it's a statement. Names teach identity. By changing the names of our streets, our cities, even our countries, we are taught a new story about who we are. Old heroes are replaced with new ones. Old ideologies are swapped for the prevailing ones. Think of cities post-revolution or post-independence. Statues of old rulers are torn down, and the plazas they stood in are renamed to celebrate the revolution's heroes. The colonial district becomes the Independence Quarter. Each new name on a signpost is a lesson in a new identity. It's a constant daily reinforcement of a new narrative. You give directions using these new names. You write them on letters. You see them on the bus. Slowly but surely, the new identity seeps into the collective consciousness. The old name and the history it represented starts to fade from everyday use, relegated to history books and the memories of the elderly. This brings us to a crucial point. A common phrase you hear is that governments, especially new ones, try to erase history. But that's not quite right. They don't erase history. They reorganize it. History is not a single, unchangeable story. It's a vast collection of events, perspectives, and facts. What governments do is select which parts of that history to highlight and which to downplay. They curate the national memory. When a government changes a map or a name, it's not deleting the past. It's choosing to build the present and future on a different part of the past's foundation. They are reorganizing the narrative to fit a new agenda, a new vision for the nation. The old maps and names still exist in archives and old records. The history is still there for those who seek it, but the official, state-sanctioned story has been edited. Look at government signage. Think about zoning diagrams in a city. These are modern maps that dictate our lives in profound ways. A zoning map doesn't just show what is, it shows what will be. This area is for commercial use, that for residential. This green space is protected, that one is slated for development. These maps are a blueprint for the future, a reorganization of our physical space that reflects the values and priorities of those in power. They decide who lives where wealth is concentrated and where it's not. It's social engineering through cartography. The signs on a government building tell you who's in charge. The language they use tells you who belongs. Is the signage monolingual in a multilingual region? That sends a powerful message about which identity is considered primary. The symbols, the colors, the very font used are all part of this reorganized narrative. They are all subtle lessons in identity and loyalty. So, the next time you glance at a map on your phone, or see a new street sign go up, or look at a city plan, take a moment to think. Don't just see the lines and the words. See the story that's being told. Ask yourself, what loyalty is this map asking of me? What identity is this name teaching me? And what parts of history are being brought to the front, while others are being quietly moved to the back? Because maps and names are never neutral. They are tools, they are weapons, they are classrooms. They are the silent, ever-present narrators of our collective story. And by understanding how they work, we can become more conscious readers of the world around us. We can see the reorganization in progress and understand the forces that are constantly shaping who we are, where we belong, and what we believe. History isn't being erased. It's just being rewritten. One map, one street sign at a time. And we are all living within the pages of that new draft. Thanks for watching. If you found this interesting, consider liking the video and subscribing for more deep dives into the hidden structures of our world. See you in the next one. Have you ever watched a documentary and felt like you were getting the absolute, unfiltered truth? A direct window into reality? Well, what if I told you that even the most well-intentioned documentary is a carefully constructed story shaped by forces you rarely get to see? Today, we're pulling back the curtain to reveal the hidden architecture of documentary filmmaking. It's a world where every shot, every interview, and every cut is a choice. And perhaps the most powerful force shaping those choices isn't the director's vision alone, but something far more practical: money. Let's start with a simple fact. Making a film is expensive, very expensive. You need cameras, sound equipment, travel, crew, editors, insurance, the list goes on. And for documentaries, which often involve years of research and filming in unpredictable environments, the costs can be enormous. So, where does this money come from? It's not like documentary filmmakers have Hollywood blockbuster budgets. They rely on a patchwork of funding sources: government grants, philanthropic foundations, private investors, and sometimes even corporations or special interest groups. And here's the crucial part. Whoever holds the purse strings often holds the power to shape the narrative. Think about it. Imagine a filmmaker wants to make a documentary about the environmental impact of a certain industry. If they receive a major grant from a foundation known for its environmental advocacy, do you think that might influence the film's tone? Of course, they'll likely be encouraged to highlight the negative impacts, interview activists, and present a strong case for reform. The funders aren't necessarily being malicious. They genuinely believe in the cause and want the film to reflect their mission, but it still shapes the story. Suddenly, the narrative might shift. The film could focus on the industry's innovations in sustainability, the jobs it creates, and the personal stories of its dedicated employees. It might downplay or offer counter-arguments to the environmental criticisms. Again, this isn't always a case of overt censorship. It's often more subtle. The funders might simply provide access to their facilities and experts, naturally guiding the filmmakers toward a more favorable portrayal. The final product could still be factually accurate, but the story it tells, the feeling it leaves you with, would be completely different. This is the power of funding. It sets the initial frame. It determines which questions get asked, and sometimes which questions are avoided altogether. A funder might say, "We love your project, but we're really interested in the human interest angle, not the political controversy." For a filmmaker desperate to get their story told, that can be a very tempting compromise to make. This doesn't mean every funded documentary is propaganda. Many funding bodies, like public broadcasters and arts councils, have strict rules to protect editorial independence. But the pressure is always there, a silent partner in the editing room. It's the ghost in the machine, nudging the story in a particular direction before a single frame is even shot. The choice of which experts to interview, which data to present, and which emotional stories to highlight can all be subtly influenced by the source of the budget. It's a complex dance between artistic vision and financial reality. So, funding sets the stage. But once the cameras start rolling and the footage piles up, the next critical phase begins: framing. This is where the story truly takes shape. A documentary filmmaker might end up with hundreds of hours of footage. For a 2-hour film, that means 98% or more of what was shot will never make it to the screen. The process of selecting what to keep and what to discard is where the art and the argument of the documentary are forged. This is framing in its most literal sense. Every decision is a form of framing. Let's take an interview. You could show a person answering a question confidently and directly, or you could cut to a shot of them hesitating, looking away, or fumbling for words right before they answer. The first option frames them as an authority. The second frames them as uncertain, or perhaps even deceptive. Both are technically true. Both things happened. But the choice of which moment to show fundamentally changes our perception of that person. Music is another powerful framing tool. A scene of a bustling city street can feel exciting and full of life with an upbeat, energetic score. The exact same footage, paired with a slow, melancholic piano piece, can make that same street feel lonely and alienating. The images haven't changed, but the story has. The emotional context provided by the music frames our interpretation of what we are seeing. Even the structure of the film is a framing device. Does the film start with a shocking statistic to grab your attention? Does it begin with a personal, emotional story to build empathy? Does it present one side of an argument first, making it the default, and then introduce the opposing view as a rebuttal? This is what's known as the order of information. The first piece of information we receive on a topic often anchors our perception. and subsequent information is judged against it. Filmmakers know this. They carefully sequence scenes and arguments to guide the audience on a specific intellectual and emotional journey. They are building a case, piece by piece. Think about classic documentary techniques. The voice of God narrator, speaking with authority over the images, tells you exactly what to think. On the other hand, a fly-on-the-wall or cinema verite style documentary with no narration and seemingly unmediated observation creates a frame of raw authenticity. It makes you feel like you are there, discovering the truth for yourself. But even this is a construction. The filmmaker still chose where to point the camera, when to start and stop recording, and how to edit those raw moments together into a coherent narrative. There is no such thing as a truly neutral camera. The act of pointing it at one thing is an act of ignoring everything else. This combination of funding and framing creates a powerful feedback loop. The funding influences the initial frame of the story, and the filmmaker's framing choices then work to deliver a narrative that satisfies the expectations of that frame, whether consciously or not. It's a system that shapes not just individual films, but our collective understanding of the world. Because the final step in this process is the most important one: how these framed stories shape our memory. When we watch a documentary, we're not just consuming information. We're absorbing a narrative. We are building memories of events, people, and issues that we may have never experienced firsthand. We watch a true crime documentary that frames a suspect in a particular light, and that becomes our memory of the case, regardless of the legal verdict. So, what does this all mean? Should we stop watching documentaries? Absolutely not. When you sit down to watch a documentary, ask yourself a few questions. Who funded this film? You can often find this information in the credits or with a quick online search. We can appreciate the artistry and the craft of the filmmaker while also recognizing that we are watching a construction, a version of reality, not reality itself. It allows us to engage with the film's argument, to think for ourselves, and to seek out other perspectives. In an age of information overload, being a critical media consumer isn't just a skill, it's a necessity for navigating the world. The most powerful documentaries don't just give us answers, they encourage us to ask better questions. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this look behind the scenes of documentary filmmaking interesting, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more deep dives into the art of storytelling. Let me know in the comments which documentary you think has a particularly powerful frame. I'd love to hear your thoughts. See you next time. Have you ever wondered what happens to the stories that don't make the headlines? The ones that don't fit the neat narratives we see every day? I'm not talking about state secrets or classified documents. I'm talking about something far more common and maybe far more powerful. Some stories never even enter the system. Not because they're forbidden, but because they're inconvenient. Think about it. Every day, countless events happen. A small town fights a corporation polluting its water. A group of neighbors bands together to save a local park. An innovator creates a simple solution to a widespread problem, but it threatens a billion-dollar industry. These aren't conspiracies. They're just inconvenient. They're inconvenient for powerful interests, for established ways of thinking, and sometimes they're just inconvenient for the 24-hour news cycle that demands simplicity and drama. These inconvenient stories get lost in the noise. They're buried under mountains of paperwork, they're redacted into meaninglessness, or they simply fade away in the silence of an empty office with a blinking cursor on a blank page. The folder stays empty. The report is never filed. The story is never told. It's a quiet kind of censorship, one that doesn't need a black marker or a government decree. It operates on indifference, on complexity, on the simple fact that it's easier to look away. Why does this matter? Because these inconvenient stories are often the most important ones. They hold the seeds of change. They show us where the system is failing, where our values are being tested, and where the real heroes are working, often without recognition. The story of that small town isn't just about water. It's about justice and community resilience. The fight for that park isn't just about green space. It's about what we value as a society. That overlooked invention isn't just a gadget. It's a testament to human ingenuity and the potential for a better way. Let's take a historical example. For decades, the dangers of leaded gasoline were known to some scientists and public health advocates, but the industry was powerful. The economic implications were huge. It took decades of persistent, inconvenient truth-telling by dedicated individuals to finally get lead out of our fuel. This happens today, all the time, in ways big and small. Think about the food we eat. They complicate our simple trip to the grocery store. They might make us question our choices or demand more from the companies we buy from. It's much easier to just see a glossy ad with a happy family and a perfect-looking meal. The official story is about progress, jobs, and revitalizing a neighborhood. But what about the inconvenient story? That story is messy. It involves tears, protests, and difficult questions about who really benefits from progress. Often, that story is relegated to a brief mention in a local paper, while the ribbon-cutting ceremony gets prime-time coverage. It's a pattern we see over and over. A new technology promises to connect the world, but the inconvenient story is about the data it collects and the privacy it erodes. A new policy promises economic growth, but the inconvenient story is about the environmental cost that future generations will pay. The system is designed to streamline, to simplify, to present a clean, forward-moving narrative. Inconvenient truths are like grit in the gears. They slow things down. They force us to stop and think. So, how do we fight this? How do we find the stories that are being left in the empty folders? It starts with curiosity. It starts with asking the second question and the third. When you hear a simple, clean story, ask yourself, what's being left out? Who isn't being heard? Whose perspective is inconvenient to this narrative? We have to become digital detectives. We have to support independent journalists, local reporters, and citizen watchdogs who are willing to dig into the messy details. These are the people who spend months poring over public records, who sit through long and boring town hall meetings, who talk to the people who are never invited onto the talk shows. They are the champions of the inconvenient, and we have to be willing to listen. When we encounter a story that challenges our beliefs or makes us uncomfortable, our first instinct might be to turn away. But we have to resist that urge. We have to lean into the discomfort, because that's often where the truth lies. It's easy to share a story that confirms what we already believe. It's much harder and much more valuable to engage with a story that forces us to reconsider. Look at the rise of citizen journalism and social media. For all its flaws, the internet has given a voice to people who were previously voiceless. A shaky cell phone video can capture an inconvenient truth that 1,000 official press releases, coup und hide, a blog post from a remote village, can tell a story of environmental devastation that would never be covered by the international media. We are all potential storytellers now. We all have the power to pick up a story that has been dropped. We can be the ones to open the empty folder and start filling it. It doesn't require a press pass or a TV studio. It just requires attention, courage, and the belief that no truth is too small or too inconvenient to be told. Every time you share an article from a small, independent source, you're helping an inconvenient story survive. Every time you ask a tough question at a local meeting, you're prying open a door that was meant to stay closed. Every time you listen to a perspective that is different from your own, you are expanding the narrative. And it is in those truths, in the stories that are hardest to tell and hardest to hear, that we find our greatest opportunities for growth, for justice, and for building a better world. Don't let the stories that matter most be the ones that are never told. Look for them, listen to them, and when you find them, share them. Ever feel like your understanding of the past is, well, a little too neat? Like it was handed to you in a perfectly organized binder? You see modern Americans commuting, staring into their phones, lost in their own worlds. You see them navigating government websites, clicking through digital archives, or wandering through quiet libraries where history is cataloged on silent shelves. You see the quiet, orderly streets of suburbia at night, lights twinkling in a predictable pattern, and you can't help but feel it. Your understanding of history, of how we got here, it comes from organized boredom, forms, timelines, approved narratives. You live inside this structure. It's clean, it's simple, and it's almost certainly wrong. History isn't a straight line. It's not a collection of dates and names you memorize for a test. It's a chaotic, messy, and often brutal story. It's a story that wasn't lived in classrooms or libraries. It was lived in the mud, in the streets, in the heat of battle, and the quiet desperation of a long winter. It's a story of raw, unfiltered human experience and the people who lived it. They weren't just names in a textbook. They were real. They were complex. They were driven by the same things that drive us today: love, fear, ambition, and a desperate need to survive. Let's talk about the American Revolution. We picture noblemen in powdered wigs signing a declaration. We think of heroic Minutemen standing up to the world's greatest empire, and that's part of it. But it's not the whole story. What about the whispers in taverns, the secret codes passed in the dead of night? What about the farmers who had to choose between loyalty to a king they'd never met and loyalty to their neighbors? This wasn't a clean break. It was a messy, painful divorce. It was a civil war, brother against brother. Communities torn apart. The approved narrative smooths over these jagged edges. It gives us heroes and villains, but reality was 1,000 shades of gray. People didn't just wake up one day and decide to be revolutionaries. It was a slow burn. It started with small frustrations. A new tax here, a new restriction there. It was the feeling of being controlled by a power thousands of miles away. A power that didn't understand their lives or their struggles. Imagine trying to run a small business, and suddenly a new law from overseas doubles your costs. Imagine seeing soldiers in your town, a constant reminder that you are a subject, not a citizen. It wasn't one grand moment. It was 1,000 tiny cuts that finally made them bleed defiance. The history you were taught was a summary. We're going to read the unabridged version. Now, let's jump forward. The Wild West. We see cowboys in white hats, dusty saloons, and epic gunfights at high noon. It's a myth, a powerful one, crafted by dime novels and later Hollywood. The reality was far grittier and, frankly, a lot more interesting. The West wasn't just about cowboys and outlaws. It was about miners clawing a life out of the rock, their hands raw, their lungs filled with dust. It was about Chinese immigrants building the railroads that stitched the country together, facing brutal conditions and even more brutal prejudice. It was about freed slaves heading west to build new lives on the frontier, founding towns and creating communities in the face of incredible hardship. Their stories are often footnotes in the grand saga of westward expansion, but they were the engine of that expansion. The true story of the West is a story of desperation and reinvention. It's about people from every corner of the globe escaping poverty, persecution, and the ghosts of the Civil War, all chasing a rumor of a better life. It was often a life of back-breaking labor, of loneliness, of constant danger from the elements and from each other. The gunfights were rare. The daily grind was relentless. That's the real epic. And what about the 20th century? We think of the Roaring Twenties as a decade-long party of flappers and jazz. We see the Great Depression as black and white photos of breadlines. We see World War II as a clear fight between good and evil. Again, these are snapshots, simplified and sanitized. The Roaring Twenties were also a time of deep social anxiety, of rising xenophobia, of a cultural clash between the city and the countryside. The prosperity that defined the decade was built on a house of cards, and millions were left out of the party long before the crash. When the Depression hit, it wasn't just about economic numbers. It was a psychological crisis. It was the shame of a father who couldn't feed his family. It was the quiet fear that settled over a nation like a permanent dust cloud. But it was also a time of incredible resilience. It was neighbors sharing what little they had. It was the birth of art and music that spoke to the soul of a suffering nation. It was the foundation for the social safety nets we often take for granted today. We see the breadline, but we miss the hands that were holding each other up in that line. History is not a spectator sport. It's a living, breathing thing that flows through us, that shapes the world we navigate every single day. The political arguments we have today, their roots run deep into the soil of the past. The social structures, the inequalities, the very language we speak, it's all an inheritance. To ignore the messy, complicated, and often uncomfortable parts of our history is to walk through the world half asleep. It's to live inside that neat, organized, and utterly false structure. Breaking out of that structure is a choice. It means seeking out the stories that weren't approved. It means questioning the simple narratives and looking for the complex human beings behind the historical figures. It means understanding that progress is never a straight line. It's a jagged, contested, and often bloody path. It means accepting that our heroes were flawed and our villains were not always monsters. They were people making impossible choices in impossible times. Think about the civil rights movement. We learn about Martin Luther King Jr.'s "I Have a Dream" speech. It's a powerful, unifying moment. But the movement was so much more than one speech. It was years of meticulous organizing. It was sit-ins and boycotts. It was thousands of unsung hero students, teachers, sharecroppers who risked their jobs, their homes, and their lives for a cause they believed in. It was the terrifying nights, the constant threats, the sheer exhaustion of fighting a system designed to crush you. The approved narrative gives us the mountaintop, but it often skips the grueling, treacherous climb required to get there. Why does this matter? Because when we only see the sanitized version of history, we misunderstand the present. We fail to see the echoes of the past in the headlines of today. We become susceptible to the same simple, dangerous narratives that have led to conflict and injustice time and time again. Understanding the chaos, the struggle, and the raw humanity of the past is not about feeling guilty or cynical. It's about gaining a deeper empathy for the people around us and a wiser perspective on the world we share. Let's explore the hidden alleyways of history, not just the main boulevards. To understand not just what happened, but why and what it means for you, right here, right now. If you're ready to break down the walls of the approved narrative and explore the real story of our past, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell. History is not hidden, it is processed. While you sleep, systems continue quietly. Nothing more is required of you. This is the promise of the modern world, a silent, ceaseless hum of activity that maintains order, that keeps the gears turning while we rest. We wake up, and the world is as we left it, perhaps a little tidier, a little more organized. The trash has been collected. The traffic lights are synchronized. The data has been backed up. We are asked only to participate, to play our part in the daylight hours. The night belongs to the system. Think about the sheer scale of it. While you're in your deepest sleep, millions of transactions are being settled. Global markets, from Tokyo to London, are alive with digital handshakes. Trillions of dollars moving through fiber optic cables at the speed of light. This isn't chaos. It's a highly choreographed ballet of algorithms and protocols, ensuring that when you wake up and check your portfolio, the numbers reflect a world that never stopped moving. And it's not just finance. Consider the flow of information. Our collective digital memory, every email sent, every photo uploaded, every search query typed is being indexed by server farms humming away in undisclosed locations. These vast digital libraries are maintained by automated scripts, tireless digital librarians that never sleep, ensuring our history is preserved, categorized, and made ready for retrieval. The system processes our memories, our communications, our very lives, turning the unstructured noise of our daily existence into neat, orderly data points. Nothing is forgotten. Everything is logged. Look closer into our cities. The logistical chains that supply our lives are most active at night. Fleets of trucks move across highways, their routes optimized by sophisticated software to avoid the daytime congestion we all know. Warehouses, sprawling monuments to efficiency, are hives of activity. Robotic arms and automated guided vehicles glide through aisles, picking, packing, and sorting, preparing the next day's deliveries with a precision that borders on the prophetic. The city is being restocked, refueled, and reset, all under the cover of darkness. This nightly reset is the invisible foundation upon which our daily convenience is built. We expect our packages to arrive on time, our grocery shelves to be full. We rarely consider the immense nocturnal effort that makes this expectation a reality. Then there are the guardians of our physical world, the maintenance crews, the street sweepers, cleaning the debris of the day, the workers repairing potholes, laying new asphalt, and inspecting bridges. They work at night because that is when the city is most still, when they can perform their essential tasks with the least disruption. They are the quiet custodians of our infrastructure, ensuring the roads we drive on are safe, the water we drink is clean, and the power that lights our homes is uninterrupted. Their work is a quiet, steady rhythm against the silence of the sleeping city, a commitment to maintenance and order that we often take for granted. Even the natural world is managed and monitored. Satellites orbit above, their sensors collecting data on weather patterns, ocean currents, and atmospheric changes. This information is processed in real time by supercomputers, generating the forecasts that will guide our plans for the coming day. Agricultural systems, too, are becoming increasingly automated. Smart irrigation systems, water fields based on soil moisture data collected overnight. Drones patrol vast farmlands, monitoring crop health. The very process of growing our food is becoming a 24/7 operation, optimized by data and executed by machines, while the farmers themselves are at rest. This continuous processing is a form of trust. We trust that the system will work. We go to sleep with the implicit faith that the sun will rise, yes, but also that our bank balance will be correct, that the internet will be waiting for us, that the world will be ready for us to step back into it. This faith is not misplaced. It is earned every single night by the silent, relentless operation of these systems. It's a social contract written not in ink, but in code and concrete, in logistics and electricity. But what does it mean for us, the sleepers? It means we can focus. We can dedicate our energy to creativity, to relationships, to the complex and messy business of being human. We are freed from the burden of constant vigilance over the machinery of civilization. The system absorbs this burden. It handles the immense cognitive load of maintaining a complex global society, allowing us to live our lives with a degree of simplicity that would be impossible otherwise. We are beneficiaries of a quiet, global collaboration between human ingenuity and automated execution. This is not a story of automation replacing humanity. It is a story of augmentation. These systems are extensions of our own will, our own desire for order, safety, and progress. They are the tools we have built to manage a world that has grown too complex for any one person or even any group of people to manage manually. They are the embodiment of our collective intelligence, working tirelessly on our behalf. Think of it as the world breathing. The daytime is the exhale, frenetic, active, full of human expression. The nighttime is the inhale, slow, deep, restorative. The systems are the lungs, drawing in the chaos of the day and processing it into the order of the night, preparing the body of society for the day to come. And in this quiet, rhythmic breathing, progress is made. Small, incremental improvements, optimizations, and repairs, accumulating over time to create a more resilient, more efficient world. History is not a static object to be found in a dusty book. It is a living, breathing process. It is the sum of all these actions, both seen and unseen. The grand narrative is written in the daylight, with bold declarations and public events. But the footnotes, the appendices, the very structure of the story are assembled in the quiet of the night. It is processed, refined, and prepared for the next chapter. While you sleep, the world is being remade, ever so slightly, in your favor. The systems continue their silent work. Nothing more is required of you. Simply wake up and live. The stage has been set for you. Thank you for watching. If this reflection resonated with you, consider subscribing for more thoughts on the hidden structures that shape our world.